It has been said that the tongue has no bones, but is strong enough to break a heart. So be careful the way you use your words. More and more hurt and damage happens inside if nobody does anything to stop bullying. So today we're going to seek to not only identify what bullying looks like, but seek to consider how it is that we can make a difference in the life of kids. Now, actually, Jesus does kind of address this, and the first text we're going to look at are some steps as to how to address it, and then the second text that I'm going to refer to but not read is from Luke 19, and it's in regards to a guy named Zacchaeus. And if you grew up in the church, you maybe grew up with a song where we used to sing, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. I kept thinking about that this week because I'm not sure Zacchaeus liked to be regarded as a wee little man. So we're going to talk about these two texts, but the first starts here, Matthew 5, verses 43 to 47. Jesus says, "You are familiar with the old written law, love your friend, and it is unwritten companion, hate your enemy." I'm challenging that. I'm telling you to love your enemies. Let them bring out the best in you, not the worst. When someone gives you a hard time, respond with energies of prayer, for then you are working out of your true selves, your God-created selves. This is what God does. God gives his best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish to everyone, regardless the good and the bad, the nice and the nasty. If all you do is love the lovable, do you expect a bonus? Anyone can do that. If you simply say hello to those who greet you, do you expect a medal? Any run-of-the-mill sinner does that. In a word, what I'm saying is, grow up. You're kingdom subjects. Now live like it. Live out of your God-created identity. Live generously and graciously towards one another the way God lives towards you. Ruth Dutton is a middle school teacher in England, and she shared in this little experiment with her students. She showed them two apples, and she asked them to list the differences and the similarities of these two apples. Well, they were both exactly the same color and about the same size. One was a little bigger and brighter, but literally that was the only difference. She held up one apple that was slightly discolored, the one that was a little bit smaller, and she said, "Gross. This apple looks disgusting." And then she dropped it on the ground. The kids all looked at her like she was insane. A couple laughed uncomfortably, but most of all, they thought the teacher really had lost her mind. She then picked up the apple and she passed it to the student sitting beside her and said, "Isn't this apple just stupid? You know, you should say something mean to this apple. Do it!" Again, she modeled dropping the apple, but then passed it on to the next person, so something mean could be said to the apple. Long and short of it is that kids actually kind of started getting into this activity. They really started being mean to this apple, saying things like, "I hate your skin, and you're such an ugly color of red, and your stem sure isn't very long, or you're probably full of worms," and so on and so on. So by the time the apple made it back to the teacher, she honestly was feeling very sorry for this object, this apple. But moving on, she then held up both apples so the kids could look at them, and then she asked them now to list again the similarities and the differences of the apple. It pretty much came back to the same. There was really no difference, even after they had repeatedly dropped the apple, because, you can't really tell the damage on the outside. She then asked the kids, "Hey, does anybody want a piece of this apple?" And of course, if you can eat food in the middle of the day at school, you immediately say, "Yes!" So what she did was she took out a cutting board and a knife, and she proceeded to cut the shiny apple open, which was perfect. And all the kids, of course, made it clear that that was the one they were interested in. Then she cut open the second one. When she opened it, of course, it was covered with brown, mushy spots and bruised all on the inside where they had dropped it. She held it up to the kids and said, "Well, would you like a bite of this apple?" And of course, all of them said, "Yuck, no, that's disgusting." That's when she looked at the kids and said, "But didn't we all contribute to the way that this apple looks? I mean, we all did. So why shouldn't we all eat it as well? The kids all kind of stopped and got really quiet. The teacher said, "See, guys, this is what we do to other people when we say mean and hurtful things. When we gossip or call someone ugly or fat or tell them they aren't good enough or that they can't be friends with us. We're just dropping them and causing them one more bruise and one more bruise and one more bruise. And you never really see it, but to them, it's very real." She said to them and held up the bruised apple, "This is what we do to each other, and it's time for us to stop dropping one another." Ruth went on to say that she had never seen her kids really get something so intensely before. It was so real to them. It was so real to them that the kids kind of left in silence. But later in the day, kids came to her, mostly in tears. There were kids that had been bruised badly, that said to the teacher that no one had ever taken the time to help them identify what had happened. They shared their stories of being bullied with the teacher. They shared how sad they were and how overwhelming it was. Now, the amazing thing about it, it wasn't only those students, but it was the students who had dropped the apples or who had been bullies in the past that also came to her. All these kids were able to identify for the first time how hateful and painful their actions and words could be. And they were so overwhelmed with guilt and shame and pain that they could not help but come to her and admit that they had done some pretty terrible things. The kids were able to identify how they had hurt one another with creating rumors or spreading gossip about one another. She believes that the activity actually went on to change this middle school in some way. That with this small circle of kids that she had in this classroom, it made a difference. And that the bullying did change a bit in that school, simply by her willingness to demonstrate how painful and bruised and beautiful the students were. You know, we hear these reports all the time, don't we? And we've witnessed the traumatic toll that bullying has taken on in our world. Do you know that 1 in 3 students in middle school is bullied on a regular basis? This bullying can be direct or it can be indirect. Sure, we all had challenges being bullied growing up, but the advancements in technology have made a difference as well. There's a whole new environment for harming one another. Cyberbullying involves both verbal and relational abuse, and it is occurring with middle school students, about 1 in every 4. Now, I mentioned that bullying is not a one-sided issue. Most often, the perpetrator is also struggling with something that's causing them to lash out at another student. Now, I'm happy to say that bullying is not one of those statistics that's on the rise. The society's ability to recognize it and try to create some different avenues for kids to be supported are making a difference. But it's not falling as dramatically and as quickly as we'd like it to. There are efforts, and you might want to go take a look at stopbullying.gov that gives you some real practical ideas on to how to deal with bullying, or eyewitnessbullying.org, which has a particular emoji that you can download. If you are witness to somebody who is bullying, you simply put this up and say, "I see what you're going through," or "I see what you're doing," and hopefully it impacts the conversation in some way. eyewitnessbullying.org. These studies show that it's most often not the teachers or the parents that the students are going to. See, the people who can have the greatest impact on these kids, the bullied and the bullier, are actually people like you and me. I mean, I say that because we don't have a lot of junior high kids in here. We have some. We don't have a lot of middle school kids in here, which says to me that either some of us don't have kids, or our kids are grown, and we are grandparents, and we are aunts, and we are uncles. And do you know, studies show that it is us, the people who are often on the periphery of the situation, who have an outsider's view of the situation that can have the greatest impact. I want to raise that today at the garden because statistically it says that the way that we can make a difference in the world in a very real way is choosing to connect with a kid in some way. Our scripture text today, Jesus said, to get over our challenges with our enemy, what do we need to do? We need to pray. We need to look within. I believe if we pray and look within, we will be mindful of a kid that we know who is struggling right now in some way. I bet all of us in this room here today have experienced in some way or another a challenge that a kid is having. And maybe we think, well, we're not really connected to that in some way or another. We think we're separated enough that we don't need to make a difference. But studies show that you are the one who can and will make a difference. I mentioned that I was trying to figure out this week if there was anybody really in the Bible who was a bully or bullied, and I just started singing that song from when I was a little kid about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is the guy who went up into a tree. That's all we really know about him. Well, he was a tax collector, and he wasn't well liked by others. So what's interesting to me is I think that he was also a bullier and the bullied. As a tax collector, he would have been identified as the bullier. He was working for a government that people didn't like or support, and he was going into people's homes and taking their hard-earned money from them, and something tells me that people did not take well to him doing that. But then also, being identified as a wee little man, I believe people of short stature do not wish to be identified as wee little man, and we created a song out of it. Something tells me this guy had a really rough time from the time he was a kid. And when Jesus came to town, he had an opportunity to encounter somebody who had not grown up with him, had not been part of his life, and so he did everything he could to encounter Jesus, including getting away from the crowd and climbing up into a tree. And what's interesting to me is that Jesus could have just kept going, but he did not. He chose to look up into that tree and to see that man. Not only did he see that man, but he called him by name. Keep that in mind. Jesus calls him by name and tells him, come down here. And then Jesus does something very, very bold. He invites himself into Zacchaeus' home and into Zacchaeus' life. Do you get this? I think in some ways we need to find the Zacchaeuses, we need to invite them down from wherever they are, and then we need to intrude on their lives in some way so that we might just be able to love them. You know, it's easier today, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends. It is easier today for you to have an impact on a kid simply by getting their cell phone number and letting them know, you know, I'm praying for you today. Let them know that you're present with them. I'm sure if you pray about it right now, one kid will come to mind, at least one, that you can recognize up in that tree, call down from the situation they're in, and lovingly intrude in their life in some way or another. Bullying, verbal, mental, physical, financial, and otherwise, are happening everywhere. Today we're only really talking about kids, and I'm so thankful that we were able to find some younger people who are willing to share their talents with us here today. Thank you very much, all of you. We do recognize that it happens in the workplace, it happens in neighborhoods, it happens all over. Today we're going to focus a little bit on the youth, and particularly these middle school kids and the high school kids, and maybe even college-age kids. Kids that we know are hiding in their rooms and who are hiding in different places. And they're sometimes hard to find. Perhaps you have somebody in your own neighborhood who is being bullied, or perhaps you're being bullied. See, people who are faithful are people who are willing to step out of the ordinary and into the extraordinary love of God. We're willing to step out of that which we know the ending will be happily ever after, and step into the reality that God is creating. Something tells me that God has a special heart for middle school kids. Something tells me that God knows the pain of a middle school kid. God needs us to look into those trees, to look into those different life experiences and situations and call those kids down. To be aware of their bruised underneath being and to remind them just how beautiful they are. Through his encounter with Zacchaeus, Jesus shows us how to stand up against bullying and how to even deal with the bullier, how to go ahead and fight with grace, how to go ahead and resist with love. See, if we put love into those kind of actions and grace and mercy and time and energy, God will go to work in mighty, powerful ways.